Hi, this is Bohn with The Verge, and today's a pretty big day. For the past few years, we've been asking for a high-end phone with stock Android, but instead got great devices with extra software or Nexus devices with subpar hardware. That all changed today, because Google is selling the HTC One and the Samsung Galaxy S4 directly, without additional software from either manufacturer or the carrier. They're available unlocked and unsubsidized, meaning you'll need to spend $600 or $650 and use them on a GSM carrier like AT&T or T-Mobile. From a hardware perspective, these phones are literally identical to their carrier-branded counterparts. The only difference is the logos on the back of the Galaxy S4. The processors, radios, screens, cameras, everything is exactly the same. So really, the only differentiation between them comes down to software. If you're thinking about buying one of these phones, you basically need to make yourself a little decision matrix. First, do you prefer the hardware on the One or the GS4? Then, once you figure that out, do you want a stock experience or not? The HTC One still has the nicer feeling hardware, with its aluminum unibody construction. Unfortunately, that's where most of its advantages end. The Galaxy S4, although it still has that annoyingly slick, plasticky design, does a better job with stock Android. That mainly comes down to buttons. The Galaxy S4 has a back, home, and menu button, where the HTC One only has home and back. On both, you double tap home to multitask and long press for Google Now, but on the HTC One, you have to deal with an annoying 3-dot menu bar on legacy Android apps, which shifts up your keyboard. That terrible plastic back on the GS4 is removable though, which means you can swap the battery out and add an SD card for more storage. I wasn't able to get any apps working on the HTC One's IR blaster, but I could do it on the GS4. On the other hand, the One still has better speakers and Beats audio, albeit not as finely tuned here as it is on Sense. Running about 6 hours on our test, neither phone offers the best battery life we've seen on an Android device, but both are better than what we've seen on the manufacturer's custom versions. The story was the same on our benchmark tests. The Galaxy S4 seemed to be just a hair faster, but not so much that you'd actually be able to notice. That leaves the cameras as the most important differentiator between the two devices. The Galaxy S4 maintains its 13 megapixel rear camera, while the HTC One retains its 4 megapixel ultra-pixel camera. You're making the trade-offs you'd expect if you've looked at the regular versions of these phones. The Galaxy S4 takes sharp images, but it still can't hold up to the low light performance on the One. The HTC One, on the other hand, doesn't give you a lot of detail if you need to crop the image. So that's hardware. If you're comparing the stock Android software experience to their custom counterparts, it's all about trade-offs. The biggest place where we'll be making a sacrifice is in the camera. Both HTC and Samsung have thrown a lot of little features into their camera software, and while most of them are neat, what's really helpful is the improved camera interface that both offer. Android's stock camera interface simply feels too basic for the quality of the cameras that it's tied to. I will say that in almost all cases I was able to match the image quality of the skin versions with the Google versions. In most cases the images came out virtually identical in my tests, the sole exception being that HTC Sense handled low light just a little bit better than stock. One side note, the stock Android Galaxy S4 did have significant shutter lag as compared to the other three phones here. But if you're not concerned with the tweakable camera experience, there's really a lot to like here. Actually, it's better to say that there's a lot less to hate. There aren't any garbage carrier apps clogging up the works. It's great to be able to have access to Google's stock calendar, messaging, app launcher, and the other apps again. The additional features and bits that both Samsung and HTC layer onto those apps still feel out of place in many cases and rarely add that much benefit. Although I will say if you're a heavy Exchange user, the stock email app on Android is still as abysmal as ever. You also get access to the latest Android features like the Daydream screensaver and home screen widgets. Presumably the benefit of being on the latest version of Android will hold, but these builds technically don't come straight from Google, so there's a possibility they'll be held back behind the Nexus. Still, they're likely to get updates way ahead of the carrier versions. HTC's blink feed, Samsung's crazy eyeball sensing technology, and all the rest of those custom add-ons always felt like they were meant more for a showroom floor demo than actual day-to-day use. Having tried both devices without them, I can't really say I miss any of it. So, which should you pick? You'll need to run yourself through that decision tree I mentioned earlier. Are you on AT&T or T-Mobile? Can you afford an unsubsidized device? Are you okay with losing some camera features in exchange for a faster, cleaner software experience? If you've answered yes to all that, the only real question left is do you prefer the hardware functions and camera quality of the GS4 over the physical beauty and loud speakers of the HTC One? Either way, both these phones offer the best Android experience we've seen yet.